Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. It is Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week 2024, and therefore we had to talk to somebody who's in the thick of Fashion Week who is looking at it from a historical perspective. So there's this incredible book that just hit, and it was created by a woman I've known for many years. She and my husband have worked together for a long time. She is Tonya Blazio-Licorish. She is an author, visual cultural historian, archives editor, design educator, and researcher. With more than 15 years in the creative industries, Tonya's interdisciplinary research focuses on reconnecting archives with contemporary social currents to sustain brand equity. That's a mouthful. Basically, she's looking at what they've got in their archives that goes all the way back and making it relevant by connecting it to what's going on today. And she created a book that really takes a look at something that many people don't look at. Her debut book with Women's Wear Daily, WWD, is Black in Fashion, 100 Years of Style, Influence, and Culture. And it just was released on September 3rd, 2024. This book highlights the impact of Black creatives on fashion through WWD's lens. Tonya holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Fabric Styling from FIT and a Master of Arts in Costume Studies, Visual Culture from New York University, NYU. She teaches at FIT New York City, Parsons School of Design, and Montclair University, and she's the curator of the Fairchild Fashion Museum. Additionally, Tonya contributes to WWD, Sourcing Journal, and Rivet. Well, today we are excited to focus our lens on her new book and its significant contributions to fashion history. So please join me in welcoming Tonya Blazio-Licorish.
Hello. Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited. It's a wonderful opportunity to have this book come out at the timing. The timing is right. It's perfect. And I'm really happy you're having me here. I'm happy to talk about it with you.
Well, I remember when you were working on it, and just to be able to go back in WWD's archives, like a lot of people don't even think about archives other than like it's something old, right? But treasures in there are significant about fashion in general, because WWD has been like the Bible of the fashion industry for
more than 100, almost 115 years. So
I mean, that is a long time.
That is a long time.
Yes, and the documentation on a daily basis of what goes on in fashion. But I was surprised first when you were telling me as you were doing your research, and then in reading the book, at how much WWD has actually covered about Black people in the industry.
Right.
Because I don't think people had that sense that there was somebody there really focusing a lens on Black culture. As you, working in the archives, began to dig and find things, were you surprised at the breadth of information that you found?
You see, my eyes got really big, right? I was very surprised. I was expecting it, to be quite honest with you. My work in the industry, I worked as a fashion designer trained at FIT, as you know. But my curiosity told me they have to be the ones. They would have covered everything. They were looking, their vantage point is so unique in the beginning and across time. You know, we know that now, like, everything is kind of curated, right? And so they definitely follow that trend, but they would be looking at it so differently. And my surprises, much of it was like, well, I didn't know that happened. I didn't know that happened. The whole time that, I do have a writing partner here with Tara Donaldson. I like to mention as well, WWD. I think we were all very, just getting in there. Every day I would say, oh my God, I had no idea. I didn't know. And so it's a bounty, really.
There is a bounty that you present in the book, and I like the way you structure it because you give historical context to each era. Yeah. And so we learn what's going on in the world and how the fashion industry is impacted, and who that was Black in the fashion industry was part of that moment. And Tonya, one of the things that I've said for years is that for those people who think fashion doesn't matter, because there are plenty of people like, whatever, you
Right.
know, that fashion, what does that mean? Everywhere in the world, every single day, people get up and get dressed, and it says something about who they are, what their choices are. It says something about this moment in history, about their personality, about what's going on in their world. I think fashion reflects what's going on in the world. And we saw in the very beginning, as this country is building and growing, there were Black people on the front lines of fashion. Can you tell us what you learned from those early days?
In the early days, I think I was expecting, as a historian, I'm looking at it from, if you're a fashion person, you understand the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, you would know that that moment happened. But in my mind, I knew that New York particularly is a portal, right, to immigrants coming over very early, and who was coming over. And I couldn't, in my heart of heart was like, we had to be there. This is fashion. Everybody's involved in fashion. Why wouldn't we be a part of that? And we were. In the early days, WWD will take sort of like a manifest on the women working in the industry. And that list included West Indian women, Black women who are already working in the factory in the labor sector. And they're number 6 as that list contains them as well. What was really important to me was that the industry itself, it is a union by that time. I think it's like around 1916. There is a union, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, MOUTFO, will be there already. And one thing that was prolific to me is that they will go to fight for the Black workers in the industry. They are making significantly less than their counterparts. But the labor union decides, they go and they speak out and they say, this is not fair. We are a union and everyone should get paid a fair wage and everyone should get paid the same wage. And that documentation, along with a young woman who will come in and sort of go forward for them and create another union. So there's a Black workers labor union that's really early on. And those kind of things were strikingly significant to like getting this document to go forward. If you understand what I mean, like there's a way of saying, where do we start? How do we start and where do we start? So in my research, I'm, digging and I'm saying to myself, okay, where do we start? Where can we start? I know what I know. I know the people I know from my timeline and growing up, but what else is there? And that's like my curiosity. Those things are important.
Sure. One of the things that I appreciated in reading the book is showing that in each era that you've covered, which is the early 1900s up until today, there were people, there was a coalition of forces, not just Black people, but people, including white folks, who were saying, everybody has to have rights. Everybody has to be treated fairly. Right. As you say, the union and other organizations that get formed all along the way. There's one, this is skipping ahead, but there was one story about mannequins. And I think this is in the late
story.
Right. Well, tell us, because I love
that's one of my favorite finds. I will tell you. Yeah.
Tell the story about the mannequins from this perspective that, we don't think of how many ways people of color are excluded, are invisible. And yet, unfortunately, the story that you're going to tell shows itself today, even, because there have been some reversal of gains. But tell us about mannequins and this is skipping ahead some generations, so we'll go back and forth in this conversation.
Well, WWD will hire Lester Gaba. Lester Gaba is a known industrial designer and also a known visual design artist in the industry. He's very well known. Lester will go on a campaign. He will start with WWD in 1945 and have his own column. And in that column, he only speaks about mannequins and store display, which is something I think is also very interesting from WWD's standpoint, the way that they will cover the industry. Lester will go on a campaign in regards to Black visibility. He's saying to the industry, I don't understand. There are more than 3 million Black people in the world, in New York City Central, in these urban environments, and they never see themselves visible in a store. If they go to a store, if it's a Black store or any store, there's only white mannequins. He will definitely, shout it out and make everyone aware. In the timeline, it's 1940s. Lena Horne will be named the most beautiful Black woman in the world, in America, say. So he will say to this audience, this reader, I don't understand why Lena Horne, there isn't a Black mannequin. Why not make Lena Horne that mannequin? She's well known. The Black community really respects her. The world respects Lena Horne at this moment. So why aren't there Black mannequins? His campaign will, go on for a while. And Bergdorf Goodman will be the first to have a family of Black mannequins. It's back to school, this timeline. And he's like, who's going to do it? I want to know who's going to do it. It's like a dare. There is a mannequin. There will be a Black mannequin, but it's not a Black mannequin. It's a white mannequin painted Black. And it's an entire campaign.
Well, but that's what Barbie used to be. I mean,
right.
The beginning of Black dolls by the mainstream companies were the white dolls with brown skin.
Right. But I would say this. When that article, I found this information, I went earlier, and you'll see in the first decade that Sugar Ray Robinson, Jack Johnson, they will call it out and say, we want to have Black dolls. And that too was something I was like, wow, this is so early in the timeline. Especially around a conversation around fashion. A doll also represents you. It kind of represents a cultural thing and how you feel because you dress the doll up to your likeness. And I think the campaign was like, no, we want to have young Black children with Black dolls so that they know who they are. It's all about representation. The mannequin is significant, though, to me.
Well, and I mean, look, this goes deep because, again, it's not just about clothing. It's about identity. It's about identity. And the fact that these celebrities, Sugar Ray Robinson and Jack Johnson, who were huge boxers and therefore internationally regarded figures, spoke up, says a lot. And we know we've had this happen with other celebrities, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, as famous actors, because they spoke up. I mean, there are many.
Right. And JJ Thomas as well,
Exactly. And so you cover what I think people aren't aware of is that there were people agitating from behind the scenes, or in this case, from publications to say this isn't fair. The reflection of our culture should be broader. So this person who had the column, he was not Black, was he?
No. He was
right. I didn't think so. And WWD from the beginning was the publication. It was the biggest publication. I mean, now there are others, but there weren't at that back then. I mean, that was it.
That was it.
So the fact that he stood up and said this isn't right counts. And I think it also counts, Tonya, because people don't realize that the fight for what is right and the fight for inclusivity has been going on.
It's long-standing. It's a long-standing fight and a long-standing conversation. It looks different, I think, differently every time the conversation is spurred by different things. But it is always, like you say, fashion is the zeitgeist, right? It's like fashion's in the middle. I always say that. And like the politics, the social, the culture, the economics, fashion is a strand. It's kind of like this like spider web, and it's like connecting itself to everything. And I think that's even more so today. Identity is so important. But that moment in their timeline, it tells you really what sort of journal they are, how they're looking around in it and around it at the same time. And I think that that's one of my most favorite.
I love that story. I love that. Hey, everybody, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole, and we are talking with Tonya Blazio-Licorish, and she has a new book, Black in Fashion. It's 100 years of fashion as reported in WWD. She's an archivist, and you can tell. She's a historian, and you can tell. There's so much in this book. So there's some names that I want to throw out, and you can give us a sense of, their importance in time as reflected through WWD. So you mentioned her already, Lena Horne.
Yes. So Lena Horne will be, once she's, in Harlem. She's in the Harlem Reviews, but her come up, I would think, for in WWD is, I think, the Blackbird, and she will significantly change what fashion is looking for. I think when we think about Black celebrity in the timeline, when you consider Josephine and who Josephine was, and I hope we talk about Josephine because she's also somebody.
You can talk about it now if you want to.
Well, Josephine will be
Josephine Baker for anybody who doesn't
for anyone who's thinking. So Josephine, I think what's significant is Josephine is not the first one to go to Paris. Ada Bricktop Smith, who is not a name most people will be familiar with. She was also an ingenue. She had one of the first, cafe places in Paris, and everybody went to her place. She had a cabaret. Everyone who was everyone, especially American, went to Ada's. So she's first, and I think connecting the idea of how Josephine will go to Paris. I always wondered when I read about the Harlem Renaissance and I read about everyone who went to Paris, why would we go? But there's someone always there. There was Ada there. Ada was kind of there for Josephine. It's an opening. It's a path. Josephine could go and be herself and claim her own, identity when she was there. And if everyone knows her story, there's some complications, but Josephine will also have hosiery named after her. That's huge. It's 1926. She's in the fashion space. She's being dressed by Schiaparelli and Poiret, and everyone loves Josephine. And I think those are different from what we see of Josephine and what we know about Josephine.
It's far more the banana leaves and
I personally, just negated that image. And I said, that's not the Josephine. I mean, there's so much more to Josephine. Designers are making fabrics for Josephine, only for Josephine to wear. Josephine will have her name in a dress label. She will sell under a label for a short time. Turbans are, everything is, because of Josephine. She's wearing a turban and everybody's trending it. And WWD will have some really significant interviews with her. I don't know that a lot of fashion press would have had that kind of access to her. She would tell the WWD's interviewee, I was first. I did everything first. I painted my nails gold and silver, and I did that first. I wore my hair. I cut my hair short and I wore dark makeup, first. I did many first. And I love that about that one article. It will be right before she actually passes, a few years before. But it's just really amazing that they had that space with her. And she was just like, no, I did everything first. So what do you mean? I'm Josephine, and I love that.
And I'm glad you do point this out very clearly in the book, that she's more than the caricature.
Yeah,
that she was a powerful woman who had a tremendous impact on culture, society, and the fashion industry itself. Now, somebody who came along who also had an impact, the fibers, and you talk about the natural fibers actually, you had her daughter talk about it, Eartha Kitt's daughter.
Yes, what a great opportunity.
That was incredible when I read that. Okay, you got it from water. And it reminded me, Tonya, my mother had a black tie closet.
Right.
Filled with evening gowns and lucite shoe boxes and
all the time that we play in.
It was just everything. And I'm reading about Eartha Kitt's closet, which was far more dynamic than my mother's, but my mother's was pretty good. But her daughter's taking us into the closet and the sumptuous fabrics that her mother wore, and she loved natural fibers, and so there was cashmere and cotton and fur, because back then fur was PC.
Right. And how she was laid on this fur cold, and her mother was like, she's fine there. She's my daughter. It's like, leave her.
So
I
Leone got in a restaurant.
Right, in a restaurant. And I mean, it says, it's like even Lena Horne. I think we know of, if you know about her and her daughter too, there's this conversation that's so beautiful, I think, between them and the fashion part of their lives. Lena was pretty much the same, with Gail. And I think that with WWD, we'll see all that capture along the way. Lena was a huge advocate, and Lena is, to me, we say classy because her style was her own style.
Yes.
She didn't really like have a designer say, like, there was no thing to me that felt like, oh, Lena's gonna wear so and so. Lena was Lena, and I love that about her. And her stories are just as important. So would be Ethel Waters,
Yes.
and being the first. When I'm researching, I'm looking for where are the Black people on the page one. That would be WWDs. That's important. That's the feature.
Sure.
And I'm like, when does the first person appear on that cover?
Ethel Waters was the first one, right?
It's not really Ethel, but a resemblance of Ethel in Home Alone, which is a very important Broadway show that she's in. And she plays a Jamaican woman, and her character's costume and her character, will be on the cover, which, the reader will see that reprinted in the paper. And that's significant, though, because you think about Josephine, and I looked for Josephine, and I'm like, where's Josephine? She's not on a cover. And, like you said, Josephine was, we know as a caricature a lot of ways, right? But Ethel Waters, too, it's so significant to the timeline. I think what I want the reader to understand is how you see fashion. When are you going to see it? How would you see it? How is a reader? How's a writer in the time, a journalist? How do you see fashion? You're going to see it on the stage. You're going to see it because there's no television, right?
Right.
Right.
It's
So
theater. It's in the
theater.
reviews.
It's in the reviews. It's in the,
And the society events.
right.
Which, by the way, we still see fashion in those places. We still look at society pages in addition to television and film. Okay, I want to ask you about a few more, lots of people, and there's so many amazing stories. There's someone who, if you're in fashion, and if you're not, you probably don't know, and that's Anne Lowe.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful exhibition at the Met now.
Yes, that features. Yeah.
And she's featured in there. So tell us, why is Anne Lowe important? And her claim to fame is probably that she created Jacqueline Kennedy's wedding dress, and she is a Black woman.
Right.
She did not get so much credit for that at the time. But as you describe in the book, she made clothes for a whole lot of folks. She was very important during an era. Can you describe her to us?
Anne Lowe, I think, was a contemporary, more like she would come in a contemporary modern time. When there's a Jackie O, there's a change in how women are dressing. Jackie O and the Kennedys are a young family. Anne Lowe is going to work in the veil of that timeline, dressing debutante. Her influence will be seen on the social register, her name, her designs. I mean, I think we still are uncovering Anne Lowe, as the exhibition at Winterthur noted, as well as with what's being shown at the Met. I think Anne Lowe is a catalyst for the independent Black designer, the dressmaker per se, and more than a dressmaker, she will be the one to kind of take that title away from Black creatives. She will officially, I think, become like the designer, not a dressmaker, and that's two very different things. Yeah.
And so, what was her era? What were the years that she was designing?
So she would be, from her purview, I think, and from WWD's timestamp, they will see her right at the Jackie moment. But I know that she was there long before then. And the reason I say she will change the moniker, because she will officially be an independent, designer. She has her own boutique, right? She's the best kept secret at Neiman Marcus. I think that's also pretty
Right.
profound, that she was this very well kept secret, or the best of her time. I think that definitely says a lot. WWD will see her until like probably mid 70s, early 80s when she passes. And that, yeah.
Hey, everybody, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Tonya, who has written this incredible book about the presence of Black talent in fashion from the early 1900s up until today in WWD. And Tonya Blazio-Licorish runs the archive department at WWD. That is, I want to come see what that looks like, because I know there's a whole lot of good stuff in there, and it's probably not all digitized. Do you have anything
It is
hands-on?
not all digitized. We work mostly like most, archives do. It's always in flux. That's an archive. We actually, our entire base of our archive is located in Los Angeles now. Right. So we have, most of it is digitized. We're a pretty digital forward company. And I think that that's really important for an archive, because that means that we're able to share it. I think a lot more and put it out there. I think with archives, that's now the flow. You
Sure.
need to get it digitized. And of course,
But
not
it
everything.
takes a lot of time, effort,
It
and
takes a lot of
money.
time and effort
order
and money.
to
I always
that.
want people to know that archives are expensive. Just know
Yes.
that. But for me, my approach, like you say, I like to look at the archive I look at the lens from the vantage point that it is written from, and then look past it and then circle around it so that we could come back to where it could be now. That's
So,
my way of working.
as I mentioned in the beginning, Tonya, you frame each chapter giving some historical context. And I think that's so important. In one of the early chapters, you talk about what happens after the civil rights movement. Well, no, let me go back for a second, because we've got to talk about the civil rights movement, because we see Shirley Chisholm. You have a picture of Shirley Chisholm in there wearing the attire of the civil rights movement, which was like Sunday best.
Sunday best.
Sunday
Right.
best. And Shirley Chisholm, for anybody who doesn't know, ran for president in 1972, a Black woman. And here we are in 2024 with Kamala Harris, who went to my alma mater, Howard University, and who is running for president. Not lost on any of us that this is, and it's a fashion moment. So Kamala Harris is wearing pantsuits, but it's still a suit. Shirley Chisholm had on a skirt suit.
Mm-hmm.
You address what the civil rights attire was, and the impact of that fashion moment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the terminology respectability politics comes to mind right away when I see Shirley Chisholm. And by the way, when I came to this archive, I was astounded that they had all this imagery of her.
Right.
So much
imagery.
Yes. And because Shirley was a fashion goddess, really, when you think about her. And if you see any images of her, she went out and she was Shirley. She talks about why she dressed the way she dressed. And it was a reflection on her neighborhood, where she was in Brooklyn, right? And where she was from. And I think that Shirley, along with a few other women in her timeline, including Gloria Steinem, they're power players, and they use their voice. They use their voice for a reason, for a purpose. Her fashion was accoutrement to her voice, I believe. And when she goes to she will also be the first Black woman seated in Congress in New York State. She understood her role. She understood her fashion. She understood how she needed to represent and present herself. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't have taken away from her voice. I do recall reading some of that from her. But I think that it's profound that the civil rights movement there's two parts to that, right? We know that we have the era of Martin Luther King and the Sunday best, and then right at the edge, we'll have the Black Panther Party. So You'll see in the book, I think it's really great to see, like, Cicely Tyson in this all leather outfit.
That's what I was getting to.
I'm
I
like,
love that.
and her cornrows. And I know that's one of the first times she presented herself that way. And
It's such a modern look. It's such a modern look. And the way you frame it is you talk about the role of SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, who they were very important in the civil rights movement. And they were telling people, buy black. Don't keep going to these stores that won't let us even try on clothes.
Right.
Recycle your dollars within the community. If we haven't heard it enough.
Right.
We need to hear it again.
If you look at, we interviewed Angela days for that. Michaela.
Yes.
I mean, it was great to speak to her because I knew she was going to give that to us, right?
Yes.
And I saw it looking at the two of them visually on the page. I was like, wow, this is pretty powerful, But WWD's coverage of the civil rights actually starts the minute there's the first boycott of the retail stores.
Really?
Wow. In Tennessee, there's going to be fire first. There's a lot that's going to happen before we get to, the crux of the civil rights movement. And it's starting in retail. It's going to start at the retail level because we're just like Lester Gaba comes in and he says, well, the Black people are shopping in the stores in their neighborhood because that's where they are able to shop, but they don't even work there. They're going to protest. WWD will cover that. There's going to be major protests.
He had that. He saw it.
He saw that. And he said that doesn't make sense. It's all in the visibility. Why am I working here? Why am I shopping someplace that I can't see myself? And I am not even at the checkout. I'm not even working here. So those protests will start pretty early on as well. And in New York, there is one store in Harlem, Blumenstein's, I believe it is. And I, forgive me, audience, my brain is like, ooh.
That was the store. I think that's what it was called.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's the only store, department store in Harlem, really, at the time. But Black people aren't working there. And WWD they'll do an article around it. I mean, it's amazing, that coverage.
And by the way, that store was where Martin Luther King came to speak and was stabbed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history with that story. Okay, I want to turn the page because there's so many things, and also let people understand that this book really does go all the way up to 2024. We're not going to do all of that. We don't have enough time to do all that. But there's things. That's
so I can quickly tell this audience what we, to set out on this kind of project. What was really important to me, because I was a fashion student. And what I know is I'm a New Orleans native, and that history of understanding, being what they say from a chocolate city, I had access and I had knowledge about us in a different way. And then I came to fashion school and I've read many fashion books, and I don't see this much information and I don't see this much coverage. So that was really important for this project.
And you did an excellent job of harvesting the information and putting it in a context that's easy to understand.
Right.
Which I think is so important. So there are a number of designers I want to mention and call out one. So there was a group. Arthur McGee was the first, I think, in 1957 to come on the scene and have his own store.
Right.
Then Wesley Tan and John Haggins. So as you know, I had the incredible good fortune to interview John Haggins just before he passed away.
And we were supposed to interview him shortly after. So
and he, one of the things that he described that I thought was really interesting is that he was a fashion designer. He was obviously a Black man, but his clientele was really New York City elite. It was not primarily Black, much like Ann Lowe. It was the people, the see and be seen people, the people who later would be in your C section of WWD, the ladies who lunch, the people who are
he was dressing those
the eye.
Yes.
And so tell us your reflections of John Haggins.
So when I interviewed John in 2020 for another article that we, right at the George Floyd moment. And John was very adamant about not saying that I'm a Black man, but John was doing, it's not that you consider him first. He wanted you to consider his clothing, his designs, his fashion, because that was what he was doing. It was a reflection of beauty for him. He loved women and he loved to see women in beautiful clothes. And I think that that was really his impetus. It was not, look at me, I'm a Black designer. That was never anything that I received from him, and he said, honestly, well, you don't not say, you don't say you're not, you are Black, and you should embrace that. But his clothing, for whatever, the consensus is what Black fashion. I mean, what is that? To me, I always say, well, what is that? Because clothes are clothes. Clothes do not become anything until someone puts them on their body.
That's right. That's right.
So.
Yeah. So there are a few others, and I'll focus on one for the moment. Stephen Burrows, Scott Barry, Willie Smith.
Mm-hmm.
So really important in the transitioning from the evolution of fashion. And Stephen Burrows is the only one who is still living.
Right.
He has been so important for decades and decades in fashion. And he was the only Black designer who was part of the famed Battle of Versailles that created this opportunity for American designers to really be showcased in a way. Before that, American designers weren't taken seriously in Europe, and this set them on their way. How does Women's Wear Daily portray Stephen Burrows and understand his impact in culture?
Well, they picked up on Stephen immediately. Stephen was with O Boutique, and he will be the first Black designer to have an in-store boutique with the noted Henry Bendel called Stephen Burrows World. And I think Stephen Burrows World says everything because Stephen created a world. He had friends he was dressing. He kind of had like a tribe. And he described it as, this was my pack of friends and we wanted to have fun with fashion. But his entry into the WWD's canon, they will note him as Stephen Burrows is American fashion.
Yes.
And that's really significant.
Very. And for those who aren't familiar, he did body conscious clothing. It was a beautiful knit, stretch knit fabric.
Jersey long before anyone. He's going to experiment with it. He will do, the lettuce edge hem, as he will always say, was a mistake. It wasn't something he was planning, but it totally, it sent him through the stratosphere. And it's so copied today. I mean, Stephen will do a wrap dress.
Right.
Or a DVF. I want people to know that. He will. And he will also do a gold chainmail dress before Versace. And he's aware.
Long before.
Really long before. The fact that he has his own boutique in a major department store on Fifth Avenue in New York is also like nobody else had that moment. Stephen, I think today he's still the one who had that moment. I don't know anyone else who would have had that moment like Stephen.
And Pat Cleveland, one of the all-time early supermodels, who was a muse for Stephen Burrows, talked about what she talks about is still part of the sexual revolution that occurred during that time. Was women burning their bras? Well, with Stephen's clothes, you didn't wear any underwear.
You didn't wear any underwear. She told us
you
that.
Just
put it on.
You just put it on,
and I think it's this like kind of cozy. Also Stephen, to me as a historian, I look at it from many angles, and I'm looking for like what is the pickup, right? Stephen really starts streetwear to me. He will bring terry cloth, something that's in the boudoir, officially in the sleeping area. He's going to take that and put it on the street, and I think for me, I would always say that Stephen started that conversation around streetwear.
And he started it before Willie wear.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
Because
he is a visionary.
he's a visionary, and he,
Absolutely.
you know, there's him, and there's also, I would like to add, Lester Hyatt, because
Yes.
Lester Hyatt will put camouflage in the fashion closet. That's streetwear. That's changing things. That's,
And
that's the
before,
conversation.
camouflage was used in the military
Only.
and in hunting.
That's right.
Right.
And Lester was a military guy. He was also the first Black maternity designer that
Right.
we have record of, right? With Madonna Maternity, and he even turned maternity into modern, more, more, fabulous fashion clothes. They have the first fashion show. I mean, yeah. I think I could probably go on and on. We could probably have millions of conversations.
It is significant.
Hmm.
And so let's talk a little bit about Willie Smith, because he was an incredible designer of streetwear,
Right.
of ready to wear that was casual. And so
Hmm.
we're moving into, like, I think Stephen was very sexy.
He was very sexy,
Willie wear was very casual.
but gender fluid.
Yes, which
Yeah.
was very significant,
Right.
that then we could wear each other's clothes and it
Right.
was no big deal, right?
No big deal.
And just for context, this is when is Willie Smith coming onto the scene?
Willie Smith will come on to this. He will be a designer in the the end of the 60s, 70s. So he'll design for another house, one house that he gets his name on the label. But he will start his own brand with his sister, right? Tuki.
Right.
They did it twice, but I think it's like 1972, 73 when they actually formed that company. But they will then, Willie is an 80s. I really want to significantly
That was
space
when he was at his height.
when he's at his peak. But I want to give him and Steven their due, because they are very different designers.
Yes.
And they're very significant to their timelines. Steven, like you say, it's disco, it's sexy, it's that thing that's happening. Willie is a different timeline. The 80s is another conversation. It's art, it's music. All that starts to happen around Willie's time.
Mm-hmm.
And Willie was profoundly connected to the arts community. He actually, make me know, Bill T. Jones will do one of his first shows, right? And this performance, fashion as performance, Willie worked with Christo, right? The Parisian artist. And he helped with the first public art space that Christo did in Miami. And I think his significance also is that he will go to Africa, like Catherine Dunham. Mm-hmm. And then when he goes to Jamaica, rather, he's going to go to the Caribbean. It changes, I think, what he sees about himself and how he starts to design. And his clothing has that sort of like easy kind of like easy casual, but it has a statement. It makes a statement with who's wearing it. I can confess, I'm happy to say Willie Smith was the first designer I bought for myself, and it
was also affordable. Let's say this too. Yes, it was affordable, and a lot of designer fashion
was not.
And so that was very different.
Willie was designing for the people. He was designing for the community. At the same time, Basquiat is around.
Yes.
And so there's sort of this like other thing happening with Willie. And I think he, his silhouettes can be worn forever, timeless.
Absolutely. And meaning today, right now.
Yeah, I wish.
And the thing about it is, well, you see it in everything. I mean, because a lot of it was very simple.
It's very simple.
It was different at the time. Right. But now it is the way that people dress.
Right. Exactly. Timeless. I mean, most of these designers, their clothing is, if you have any, you should hold on to it.
Absolutely. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking fashion during Fashion Week. We're talking with Tonya Blazio-Licorish. She has written a book, a big book that has all kinds of information in it, looking at Black people in the world of fashion over the past 100 years, as documented through the Bible of Fashion, WWD, Women's Wear Daily. Okay, we have to talk about someone who we both know, my husband, George Chinsey.
Yes.
George has worked for WWD for 41 years. He has been a photographer there. I think he's the only Black one who's been there for the past 40 years. There was one person before him, and he's covered everyone. I
Yeah,
mean, absolutely everyone, of whatever background they have been. But when you go through the book, there are a lot of
George.
images
Yeah.
that George has shot.
Hmm.
Let's talk about photography
Hmm.
and capturing of these images and what that means for your book and just for documenting history.
So photography is intimate, right? It's also the eye of the person behind that camera,
Mhm.
and they tell a story. And WWD, in the canon of this paper, the photographers are the storytellers.
Mhm.
They are the ones who let you see something so not the way it's hanging on a rack in the store or even on a runway. And are also like lots of George's photography. Um, when we spoke to George, and I speak to George a lot, and he has magnificent stories about the timeline,
It's a great
about,
story.
yeah, like, oh, I shot, lots of the Black art designers that will come in through the 90s. George would have shot them.
Yep.
He knows their story. He knows this industry. He's seeing it from a very intimate space, actually, because I think photography is intimate that way.
Mhm.
It's magical what a photograph can do. And when you're doing a book like this with so much photography, those pictures talk to me. They talk to me and they tell me, like, this is what you should be saying. This is how you should put this together. And that's because of the photographer. I mean,
Right.
I think fashion photography has had many different, you know, uh, paths. It looks different over time. But a photographer is always current to me, no matter what they're photographing or when they photograph something. It could have been 1920. You look at it now, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. I think for George, what's prolific is his idea that, he talked to us about being with the subject,
Mhm.
and how it's very important that you understand the subject that you're shooting, and that you give them the grace and the space, right, so that they can be at their most comfortable, and they can allow you to get, that image that you're looking for. Yeah.
And I'm going to add, because I call him my lighting man, but to light people of
Intimate.
color
Yes.
in a way that really celebrates how they look is not an easy thing to do.
No.
And I think that WWD is very fortunate to have had him
Yeah.
all these years to be able to shoot people of color, because there are
Right.
plenty of folks who've taken pictures of me, whether video or still, and have no clue how to light brown skin.
Yes.
And
And George is really, I mean, he took my photograph 8 shots. He's like, "You're good." I'm like, "Are you sure?" I was thinking I was gonna sit here forever. Oh, he goes, "No, it's
okay,
good."
you got it.
I got it.
So,
Yeah.
Tony, what do you hope that people will take away when they read and take in all the images from this book?
I hope they're profoundly joyful. I was profoundly joyful when I was done. I think we were all looking at this project like, wow, and to have it come to life. It's a tome, and it could be a part 2, a part 3 as we continue. And I do hope that for a young reader, or even any reader, that we embrace the idea that the document is it's where the information is.
Mm.
WWD's vantage point is significantly important to the industry, to the fashion, to the history of fashion, period. And it's not even a condensed volume. It's 365 days of the year. It's every single day. So I do hope that everyone takes this book as kind of a new sort of picture book, because it's a reader and a picture book. And I hope you love it and enjoy it, and hold on to it, for many, many years. Yeah.
Well,
And
we
celebrate
appreciate.
yourself. Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Blackness is great. It's a beautiful thing to Tracy Reese wrote the forward, and
Yes.
she was like, I just will treasure this forever. So yeah.
Well, there are people you learn about, even if you are entrenched in fashion,
Right.
which I am. And there are plenty of names that I didn't know. And there's information, also great references in the back if you want to go digging for
Yeah.
more, which I hope people will. Congratulations.
You.
Congratulations. This is our labor of love. I know
Yeah.
it comes through in that way. And I'm enjoying it very much. Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank all of you for tuning in. This was great. Tonya Blazio-Licorish has created this book, Black in Fashion, 100 Years of Style, Influence, and Culture. It's all what is in the pages of WWD. An incredible read. You will learn a lot. Until next time, everyone, have a great day and make it count.